Hey there, everybody. I think we are now live. Welcome to Ask Dr. Ann um, live. Love answering your questions related to my areas of expertise, which are food, nutrition, healthy living, disease prevention through food and nutrition. Um, Ultimately, I'm trying to inspire you, motivate you, clear up areas where you have confusion, and I guess ultimately kind of empower you to live the healthiest life because guess what? You control your health, right? Um, yeah, yeah. You hold that master lever. And the way you do that is through right foods and the right lifestyle activities. Okay, so we had lots of wonderful questions already submitted. So, as always, I'm going to start first with those questions, and then we are delighted to answer any questions that those of you that may be joining us live have for me. And I also want to just give a shout out to the people that will watch this in the recorded format. We know that many people submit questions and can't get on the live stream, but are really appreciative to have the access to the full recording of it. So I'm going to let Zoe, my trusty right hand and left hand, honestly, woman, read the questions because she does a better job of that than me.
Okay. All right. The first question says, I've been trying to cut out diet soda and have found that a couple of ounces of kombucha quenches that type of craving. Is that a healthy choice?
Great. Well, so I think any transition away from regular and diet soda pretty much is almost always going to be a win. And what a smart thing to use kombucha to kind of bridge that, breaking that habit. So what's happening is a lot of people that are kind of hooked on sodas, both diet and regular, they're hooked on the pop they feel in their mouths, that kind of stimulation they get from the effervescence or whatever you want to call it, the bubbly that you experience in your mouth. And one thing great about kombucha, which is a fermented beverage, is fermented tea. So it's got lots of probiotics in it. It's got all kind of bioactive compounds in it. Here's mine right here. I add a little green tea to mine. Um, it has that kind of buzzy feeling you get in the mouth, and it's very slightly sweet, but relative to what I'm worried about with artificial sweeteners, sugar substitutes, and of course the regular sugar and soda, the little small modest amounts of sugar that are in kombucha, um, and if you do the right amount, like no more than 4 ounces a day, it's a great thing to do, and it's what I have at my lunch. So um, in fact, someone asked me, like, we'd love to know, like, what'd you eat today? I'll answer that when I get to that question. But so at my lunch, I always have about that much lemon ginger kombucha, the Health Aid brand, because that's the lowest sugar um, variety brand that I have found. There may be others. Okay. I don't have any commercial relationships with any other third party. So I'm not, giving them like, oh, some shout out because I'm going to get a kickback or anything. But anyway, I just love it. It's filled with ginger. It's got a great flavor, and I add a little bit of matcha powder, which off the charts, good for you, filled with polyphenols, to mine, and that's what I have for my lunch. So yes, I think that transitioning to a lower sugar kombucha away from diet soda is a huge win.
Great. Okay. So the next question says, what are your thoughts on the various flours like cassava and oat and almond as it relates to raising blood glucose levels?
Okay, so traditional flour is white flour, right? Which is not good for us because that is wheat that has been stripped of its outer bran and its inner germ, meaning all that's left is the inner starch. And then they grind it up into this super fine powder. That's what white flour is. And it has an enormous propensity to shoot your blood sugar up to unhealthy points very quickly. Okay. And as do all great white hazards, white flour products, white rice, the white of a baked potato, and sugar and sweets. So healthier alternatives to that menace of white flour are going to be whole grain flour. So you can get all sorts of whole grain flours now available. Oat flour is one. almond flour. Of course, almond is not a whole grain, it's a nut, but like whole grains, it's very, very good for your health. And this is just flour made from ground almonds. Okay. So obviously that is going to have, the nutrition that you get in almonds. Oat flour is going to have the nutrition you get in oats, and some of these other, you can get brown rice flour, you can get millet flour. I know about all these healthier flours because my husband can't do gluten and he makes his own bread. And those are the kind of flours he brings. But let me go ahead and use this teaching opportunity to say, although oat flour and almond flour and cassava flour and millet flour and some of these other wholesome whole grain flours are clearly a huge improvement over white flour, because they have still been physically processed. They have. When you eat oat flour, you're not eating, an oat groat, right? You're eating that oat groat that's been ground up into this, fine sort of powdery substance. And one thing negative that does is that physical processing to turn it up naturally is going to increase its digestibility, which is what dictates how high your glucose goes after you take in a carb-based food. Okay. So remember, all carbs that come into your body ultimately end up in your bloodstream as the same thing, which is glucose. Okay. And the faster that carb food is digested, the easier it is to digest it, the quicker your glucose is going to rise. So when we look at the glycemic response, if you eat, let's say, a quarter cup of oat flour versus a quarter cup of, say, steel cut oats like oatmeal, your sugar is going to go up significantly higher with that oat flour versus the oatmeal. So I guess the point of this is, if you have to have a flour for some reason, right? Because you're baking something, then yes, whole grain flours are clearly the healthiest way to go. But the most powerful thing you can do to leverage the goodness that whole grains can offer you is to eat physically intact whole grains, which is what I do. That would be like brown rice and oatmeal and barley and quinoa. And, there's all kind of, you could do farro. There's all sorts of more exotic, or what we call more ancient, old world whole grains you can now get intact too. So I hope that answers the question and gives you a lot more important teaching in that answer.
Okay, great. So the next question says, my husband does not believe that plant-based proteins count or are as good as protein from meat. How can I convince him that plant proteins like beans are just as good, maybe even better?
Okay. Oh, what a great question. In fact, I was so enthusiastic about answering it, I almost didn't let Zoe finish. Sorry, Zoe. So first of all, boy, do plant-based proteins count, and they count really big, and they will tick off way more boxes than you can tick off with your animal-based proteins. Okay. So first of all, plant-based proteins do contain all the essential amino acids. They do. That's kind of I won't say a misnomer. It's kind of a myth. And it really drives, the most esteemed academic nutrition experts crazy. I've heard Dr. Chris Gardner, who's at Stanford, great, amazing scientist and fella, talk about this, that it makes him nuts that, plants do have all the essential amino acids. They just don't have them in the concentrations that you get from animal-based foods, which is why we recommend for vegans and vegetarians to make sure they get a variety of plant-based proteins, because when you get that variety, you're not going to have any trouble at all getting all those essential amino acids. And it's the grams of protein in a plant-based protein count as much as the grams of protein in an animal-based food. So yes, they do count. Yes, they're highly and just as effective as animal-based proteins and giving you what they need. Few things that I think are important to maybe for your husband. Tell him to go watch the documentary Game Changers. So this is a documentary that features world-class athletes. Many of them are famous. You're going to know some of these athletes. He will know some of these athletes that when they transition from an omnivorous diet to a vegan diet, their athletic performance went through the roof. And it makes sense when you know all the goodies you can get in plant-based proteins that you simply can't get in animal-based proteins, like phytochemicals, like fiber, like a higher concentration of vitamins and minerals per unit volume, right? Like no bad fats. I mean, these things have enormous positive impacts on our biochemistry and our physiology and our ability to have really healthy muscles and for our muscles to function properly. So he can watch that and he will see that the world record for the strongest man in the world, he is a vegan. Okay. And he has got the world record for the biggest deadlift over his head. But there are a whole slew of extraordinary athletes that are featured in that film. Then the other thing we have is we have clinical trials comparing in for example muscle, because I'm thinking this particular fella is thinking about his muscles, right? And please don't forget that if you die of a heart attack or have a stroke, who cares if you have big muscles? Okay. All right. And that's the other big thing, for plants, is just what they're doing for your overall health, and that in ways that some of these other animal-based proteins can't do. But we have clinical trials where we've literally pitted plant-based protein against animal-based protein, looking at, real people, looking at, they'll do muscle biopsies and things like that. And I'm telling you, we just don't see any significant difference. Okay. So, plant-based proteins, not only do they count, they have features that you simply can't get at animal-based proteins. Now, I'm not a vegan, I'm not a vegetarian, but you better believe that the overwhelming majority of what I eat is plants, and I really, really try to hammer my plant-based proteins. What I strive to do in my day is limit my animal-based foods to no more than one serving. The exception would be fermented dairy, like kefir, or a little bit of aged cheese. I use those things, relatively regularly because I love them, and I do think they have special health benefits because they're fermented. So.
Okay, great. This person says, I love when you share your real meals on Instagram because it gives me new ideas and inspiration. Can you tell us what you had for meals so far today? I would enjoy seeing what I ate in a day or week video with
Sure.
breakfast, lunches, dinners,
That's
snacks.
that's a great thing. I was just telling Zoe, my camera right now is not really working great, so I haven't been taking many pictures of my food because the pictures are really crappy. And I think I've solved it. It looks like that little protective shield on the camera lens is cracked. Anyway, I got to figure that out. Before I get to that answer, to answer that question, I want to say, since I was just talking about plant-based proteins, let's remind people that are on this live stream what the plant-based proteins are. What are the plant foods that give you really, really nice, hefty, robust doses of protein? So that's going to be your whole soy foods. That's tofu, tempeh, edamame, soy milk, right? So whole soy foods. And then we have nuts, all nuts, okay, including peanuts. In fact, peanuts are really the highest. Peanuts and almonds give you more protein than the other nuts, but all nuts, all seeds, and seeds are incredible, are a really good source of plant-based protein, and they're high in protein. And then we have, quinoa, right? Quinoa is actually, we refer to it as a whole grain, but it's actually a seed, which is why it has so much protein. And quinoa has complete protein, nice doses of those essential amino acids, as does whole soy foods, and as do hemp seeds. Okay. So I love hemp seeds too. So nuts and seeds, whole soy foods, and legumes. Let's not forget legumes. Really, really, really important. Lots of protein, and that would be all beans, all peas, all lentils. Okay. So now I'll answer the question. So because I do time restricted feeding, which means I limit my eating to a 10-hour window, sometimes a little less. That's my goal to do each and every day. Um, I just do 2 meals a day because that's one thing I love about TRE is, it saves you from having to prepare and think about 3 different meals. And I have my first meal between 10 and 10:30. And it's usually more, and I try to eat a lot, right? Because our metabolism and our body's ability to handle food and its digestive function and its metabolic function, making the most of that food, is actually most robust in the day, right? And as the day goes on, the body's ability to digest food and make the best of it and in good ways kind of starts, diminishing, right? And it's particularly not good in after dark. Um, anyway, and so what I had today is almost 80 or 90% of the time, my lunches are dinner leftovers. And that's why I love making a healthy dinner because it's like 2 for 1. It's automatically means that I've got a healthy lunch. And usually I think leftovers taste better than they did the first time around. And so what I had for dinner last night is I sauteed some onion and a shallot and a green bell pepper and an orange bell pepper. And then I had some duck breast. My husband's a duck hunter, and probably my most treasured, protein, and I don't get it that much, is duck breast. And so I pan seared some duck breast, just perfectly cooked, and I sliced that really thin. I added that to that onion pepper mixture, and then I made quinoa, cooked quinoa, right? Just the standard. Cook it like they tell you in the package. I always cook my quinoa in broth. Last night I used chicken broth, and then I added that to that mixture. And then I had, before that, most nights I make a dinner salad, and we have tons of lettuce growing in our garden. So I'm trying to eat, you hate wasting all this beautiful, fresh lettuce. So I've been eating, trying to eat a big salad before dinner. And I did that. And it was romaine from the garden. I did dice up an egg, not an egg, an apple. I had some onion in there. I had 3 vegetables on top of that. Oh, and then I grated up a carrot. And then I always make my homemade dressing out of, last night it was apple cider vinegar, a little mustard, extra virgin olive oil. And I always put a little something sweet in there. I think I used a little coconut sugar to sweeten it a little bit to counter the tart of the apple cider vinegar. And then I also made Brussels sprouts, but it's a long story. I ended up not eating the Brussels sprouts because they weren't ready. I try to end my eating, it's by 7. And, if something's not ready and it's that time, I'm just not going to eat it. And so what I had for my lunch then is I had that leftover quinoa with pepper, onions, and ducks. I had the Brussels sprouts I would have eaten last night plus today's for, as another thing. Then I had some leftovers from 2 nights ago, which was a linguine that was gluten-free. So I love the Bio Nature brand. So it's kind of got it's made with red lentils and like brown rice flour. And I had some broccoli and peas, sauteed onion. So basically I took a crown of broccoli, diced that up, put that in with a bunch of onion, a bunch of chopped fresh garlic, probably a little bit of Italian seasoning. Then I added frozen peas. Then I cooked my pasta, and then I added the pasta to that, and I hit it with lemon. I hit it with extra virgin olive. Anyway, and so that was dinner from a couple nights ago. So that's what I had for my lunch. And I haven't really planned my dinner tonight. We might go out to dinner, and if we don't, I don't really know what I'm going to have. I've got some crab in there. Maybe I can make some crab cakes. I've got plenty of lettuce. I mean, I always have things I can make plant-based stuff. So, all right. Hope that answers that question.
Okay, next question. What foods and or supplements help reduce calcium plaque on arteries?
Okay, so I guess the best way to phrase that question is, Dr. Ann, because calcium buildup in arteries is basically what, plaque. Calcium's part of plaque, and plaque buildup in arteries is, ultimately what leads to heart attacks and strokes, right? Not all strokes, but most strokes. So the better way to say this is, Dr. Ann, what can I do to reduce my risk of cardiovascular disease? Well, we know that at least 80% of cardiovascular disease is preventable through diet and lifestyle. At least. It probably is higher than that, but let's just say it's 80%. And what do we know works the best? So plants. But in fact, I'll just say this: if someone, like if my husband had a heart attack, which he should be hopefully pretty heart attack proof because he's been eating the way I feed him for a long time. I would want him to probably become pescatarian, strictly eat plants and then some fish, and the fish to get the omega-3. So, the more plants you do, the healthier your heart is going to be. Whole plant foods, right? And, again, there's tons of nuances to, if I was sitting down with someone that had recently had a heart attack and I was, counseling them on all the things they could do, it would be an hour and a half consultation. And I would go, very specifically through things. But if I don't have that time to tell you this right now. So I'm just going to say that the upshot is you end up eating lots of whole, real plant-based foods. And that kind of means you're conquering your carbs, right? So you're not eating refined processed carbs. You're not eating white flour products, white rice, white potatoes, sugar, or sweets, or you're doing those very rarely. And instead, you're eating an abundance and a variety of fruits, vegetables, beans, whole grains, right? So that's conquering your carbs. And then you've got to give yourself an oil change. That's the other big thing. So out with the bad fats, in with the good fats. The bad fats are saturated fats. It's very simple to learn this. So, where do you get those? Four-legged animals. So that's, cows, pigs, and sheep. So you're going to limit red meat. Either don't do it at all. And if you do it, probably best, based on the best data we have, to do it no more than one day a week. Right. And then you're going to use butter sparingly. And you need not miss butter. We can use all that wonderful extra virgin olive oil. That's a healthy fat. Okay. And then you're going to stay away from processed foods, which is the only place you're going to be getting palm oil. Right. So that's out with the bad fat. You've done that if you do that. And then in with the good fats. So what are the good fats? So monounsaturated fats. Extra virgin olive oil is the top. So that should be the oil of choice. And then we have avocados. And of course, avocado oil will be fine, but it's not as good as extra virgin olive oil. And we have nuts and seeds. And yeah, let's see. Avocados. So that's the monounsaturated fats. And then you need those long-chain omega-3 fats, of which the only place you can get them preformed in the way your body really requires them is doing the oily fish. That's Santa, 'tis the season. Salmon, tuna, mackerel, sardines, herring, lake trout. And if for some reason you're vegan and vegetarian, don't want to do seafood, oily fish, then you can always do an algae-based DHA supplement, which is a way you can get those long-chain omega-3 fats as a vegan or vegetarian. And then there are other sources of omega-3, but not the long chain ones, that can help, but they really can't do what they really can't provide all the omega-3 fats you need. And so that's the fat part. And then the protein part, if you just learn to do your carbs right, learn to do your fat right, and learn to do your protein right, anyone can that you've mastered healthy eating, and it's just not that hard. And then for the protein, it's just a matter of choosing the proteins that we call the healthy packages. So the top of the list are going to be plant-based proteins. I've already talked about those, which is going to be legumes, which is beans, peas, and lentils, then nuts and seeds, and then whole soy foods. All right. So those are your plant-based proteins. And then next on the list would be seafood, particularly oily fish. So you can get those long-chain omega-3 fats. And then other proteins that are acceptable would be, you can do eggs, and I would get eggs that have omega-3 fats in them. You can do poultry, like turkey and chicken, wild game if you can get it. Like, I do the duck. We do get some venison. And then just, be leery of red meat, and particularly processed red meat. And again, for someone worried about heart health, if you wanted me to be absolutely true to the data, I would say the most radical thing you can do dietary wise to improve cardiovascular health is probably transition to being, pretty much vegan or pescatarian, right? Where you're having just plants and then some fish, particularly oily fish.
Okay, the next question says, this person currently takes calcium and vitamin D for bone density. Is vitamin D3 a good alternative to vitamin D?
Yeah, so the vitamin D you want to be taking is the D3 form, okay? Because we know that form is more bioavailable when you take it, okay? So everyone, vitamin D, it is a really important nutrient, critically important. Let me make sure people know a little bit about vitamin D. So people think, oh, bone health. And yes, it's absolutely pivotal, essential for bone health because it is what allows us to be able to absorb calcium. And, calcium is such a big component of the physical structure of your bones, right? So we need it for bone health, but it's way, way, way more important than just bone health. So it is kind of a master regulator of the human genome. So it really is needed at the level of your genes to turn the right genes on and turn the wrong genes off and do all sorts of good things there. There's tons of receptors for vitamin D up in the brain. So we know it's extremely important for brain-based things, okay? So it's no surprise that we see really consistent observations that people that are low in vitamin D are way more likely to get cardiovascular disease, autoimmune conditions, mental health disorders, dementia, cardiovascular, if I hadn't already said that one, just whatever we look at, we see a higher risk of those things. So and the problem with vitamin D is twofold. So it's a really common deficiency. So we measure people's vitamin D levels. We see that a huge number of them, depending on which study you look at, anywhere from 50 to 70% of adults in America are deficient in vitamin D. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is it's not something you can get from food. In fact, there's only a couple of foods that naturally have vitamin D. And even if you knew what those foods are, which are oily fish and certain species of mushrooms, and you eat them constantly, you still could no way from diet get all the vitamin D you need. Meaning we are intended to get our vitamin D from being outdoors without, and having our skin exposed to sunlight. And we get vitamin D from the sun. And anyway, so yeah, that's probably why a lot of people are deficient, because even in my climate, which is pretty, in Charleston, South Carolina, in the fall, winter, and the spring, I don't care how much time I spend out there, you can't get enough vitamin D because of the angle of the sun's rays are just not strong enough. So supplements seem to be something that is essential. It can help to know the foods that have them, right, and try to include those foods. But most people will require a supplement of vitamin D. The best thing to do is to get your level checked by your healthcare provider. And because a lot of people are deficient, that means they need prescription strength doses to bring it up. I mean, you could take the over-the-counter doses, you're not going to bring it up. You need the prescription strength, at least for a while. And then maybe you can transition to a supplement dose. So back to this question. So I'm a pretty big proponent, at least in, most climates, except perhaps not in the summer, but other times of year, of taking a supplement of vitamin D, and kind of, a basic healthy recommendation, assuming your vitamin D assuming your level is good and normal, would be to take anywhere from 1,000 to up to 4,000 IUs a day of vitamin D3. You want the vitamin D3. And then what was the other part of that question? Because I thought there was another part.
I think you covered it. Is the absorption of calcium effective without vitamin D?
No, and it's not. Yeah, so that's why vitamin D is so important for bone health, because it, you could take all the calcium until the cows come home, and if you're not replete in your own body in vitamin D, you're not absorbing that calcium.
And somebody from Instagram said, do you have to take D3 with vitamin K and A?
So they're saying they're telling me that, or they're asking that?
Asking.
Oh, okay. So first of all, you don't have to. No, you don't have to. But there are other nutrients that we think are important for bone health, and vitamin K is an important one. And if you have a healthy gut microbiome, the microbes, you're getting that from the gut microbes. And it's not a standard recommendation. I think everyone needs to take vitamin K by any stretch. And anyway, and vitamin A is not so much, it's important it's critically important, but it's not so much a nutrient that we focus on for bone health, right? And it's not a super common deficiency. So I'm not quite sure why they group vitamin A in with calcium and vitamin K. And let me just say this. So I'm pretty much a proponent of taking a basic multivitamin, just to, not that the data is super strong that they absolutely help us. There's not really data that they hurt us when they're taken in appropriate amounts, like, just taking the near 100% of what your body requires or thereabouts. And there's a little bit of evidence for benefit, but I think it's more so sort of a safety net is why you're taking it. That just to prevent the chances that day to day, even if you have a healthy diet, sometimes you just can, it's just the way things go, that you may be a little bit low in a certain nutrient, and that's just not something we like. I think my husband's coming in, but we'll just have to deal with it. Sorry, John, I'm in the middle of a live stream. That's okay. You can do what you need to do. It's okay. Anyway, okay. Next question.
Okay. This next question says, are eggs good for us? I assume is what you mean.
So eggs, eggs are really have some very important features. They have been, and they can be extremely healthy. So let's talk about eggs. So eggs have been a bit unduly maligned, right? Particularly based on the data we have now. So what are the great things about eggs? So first of all, they're an incredibly affordable form of really high quality protein. They have all the essential amino acids. You're getting a nice dose of protein with hardly anything bad in there, right? The other thing about eggs that people don't appreciate is they have amongst the most bioavailable form of lutein. They have a lutein in the egg yolk, which is really, really good for the brain, really, really good for our eyes. There'll be vitamins in there. And if you get the right kind of eggs, and you get some minerals in eggs, and if you get the right kind of eggs, which are eggs that have been fortified with omega-3 fats. So what happens is the farmers that are raising those chickens are fortifying the chickens' diets with things that have omega-3 in them, right? And that means omega-3 gets incorporated into the chicken's yolks, which is why I like people to eat the yolk, because if you don't eat the yolk, you're not getting the lutein, you're not getting the omega-3, you're not getting some of the other things that that are good for us that are in the egg yolk. Anyway, so I think, and at this point in science, there's no evidence at all that in healthy people eating eggs, as part of a balanced diet has any adverse effects. I mean, we don't see that at all. They did, even in clinical trials, we're feeding people tons of eggs and looking what happens with biomarkers. There is some data, interestingly though, it's mostly not in the European data, but like in Europeans, but mostly in Americans, that people, if they're already diabetic and they, eat eggs, regularly eat eggs, that it might increase their risk of cardiovascular death. Well, we don't see that in Europeans. And we think what it is probably confounding, is that so many Americans that are eating eggs are also eating bacon and sausage, right? So it's probably a confounded finding. Nonetheless, so what I typically tell people is, if you are doing a balanced diet, and I can't stress the importance of doing a lot of variety in your diet. And the reason you do that is because nutrients are distributed across a wide range of foods, that if you have a limited diet, you just really increasing your chances that you're going to get a deficiency of something. So you need a broad range of foods to be assured you're getting that full range 42 plus essential nutrients that the body has to have a regular supply of, like, all the time, right? And so if you're doing a balanced diet, I find it unimaginable that you could ever need more than, like, say, let's just say 6 to 7 eggs in a week. I love eggs, and there's nothing holding me back from doing them. And I probably rarely, if ever, go more than 4 eggs a week. Because when am I, if I'm doing that, when am I having time to get in all these wonderful other protein sources, right? Like my plant-based proteins and my seafood and that kind of thing. So,
Okay, what is your opinion on protein shakes?
So I'm a real advocate of people eating real food, because that's really where we have the data, and that's how we know humans from the beginning of time have been procuring their calories and their nutrients. So it makes sense to me that is definitely the best and the safest way to get the things we need from food. Okay, so I would personally prefer that someone do real food-based protein. I mean, can you have, some of the plant-based proteins? Can you have some nuts? Can you have some seeds? Can you have some beans or peas or lentils? Can you have some whole soy foods? Can you have some oily fish? That's what I do. I don't do protein powders. Now, that said, I understand and I am respectful of the convenience of these protein powders. People are in a hurry and like, oh my gosh, I know I need to try to get some protein with this feeding, because I know that protein can help me with appetite control. And, I know I, need to get my amount. And, it can be convenient to do that. But I mean, do we really have long-term data on the health value of protein powders? No. And I think if you're going to do them, I would just be sure. And I don't really have a huge preference which type, because all different types. But I would definitely do organic. How else? You have to. To me, it's like, oh my gosh, what kind of chemicals were used in creating this and extracting this protein, and so that worries me a little bit. So anyway.
Okay, next question. Is jar sauerkraut effective for gut health?
So when this person's saying jarred, I'm going to assume they're talking sauerkraut on the grocery shelf that's not refrigerated. If that's the case, again, probiotic foods, fermented foods, okay, which are the foods that have these live active bacteria in them, which are incredibly good for you, right? Fermented foods are all the rage, and deservedly so. And I'm a huge advocate of them. And to be assured you're getting a fermented food that contains live active cultures, which is what you want, that contains those probiotics, you have to purchase it from the refrigerated section. If it's not refrigerated, then we know it's been pasteurized, because you can't take a fermented food with live bacteria and put it at room temperature on the grocery shelf, because those bacteria are going to continue to ferment, and who knows what it will ultimately turn into. Okay. And it might explode explode the jar. So no, if you're asking me about the sauerkraut that's on the shelf, yes, it's got fiber in there, and it's going to have some other nutrients in there, but it won't have the probiotics. So you want to get the kraut. I'll just show you my refrigerator. See, my refrigerator right there. Open the refrigerator. So you want to get kraut, fermented foods. Well, this is not kraut, this is kimchi. And like this brand makes all kind of wonderful krauts, right? So you've got to get it refrigerated. And that's the only way you're going to get the probiotics.
Okay. This person said, I'm just starting Paxlovid. Do you think I should continue the intermittent fasting?
Okay. So, I don't practice medicine anymore, so I don't know all these newer drugs. Paxlovid, I think that might be one of those. Is that a weight loss drug? One of those newer weight loss drugs? Paxlovid. Just ask that person and tell her to answer.
Okay.
I think it is.
Yeah, if she is still on, we'll see if she comments. We just have to pin that and come back to it.
Yeah. It probably is. It probably is one of those weight loss drugs. And if that's, well, why don't we just, I don't want to speculate until we know. So
Okay.
sorry that I don't know, I don't keep up with all these drugs. There's no reason for me to do that.
Next question, is hard cheese okay?
So cheese, the right kind of cheese, which is aged cheese, the ones that are what I consider real cheese, that is an aged dairy food, right? Is a fermented food, right? That's why we like these aged cheeses, and they tend to taste so good. So processed cheeses like American cheese and mozzarella sticks, and some of the ones that you see particularly marketed to children, those are not going to have, those aren't aged cheeses. So your sharp cheddars and your Swiss and your more artisanal gourmet cheeses that you can get now at just the standard grocery store, that is a fermented food for sure, and you're going to get some beneficial bacteria in there. And small amounts of aged cheese, I think, are great. Cheese, does have a lot of dairy fat in it, but dairy fat is not the villain that we once thought it was. It does have a lot of calories, and calories do count. Even healthy foods, their calories ultimately count. So I include aged cheese, but in small to modest amounts.
Okay, great. Next question. Is it dangerous to eat charred vegetables such as roasted Brussels sprouts that have parts that turn black when cooked?
Yeah. So the benefits of those foods far outweigh the good things you can get far outweigh the negatives that may be in sort of their charred portions. So it's like taking 10 steps forward and maybe one or two back, right? So let's talk about this sort of charring thing. When we take foods, particularly your animal-based foods that have a lot more fat in them and a lot more protein in them, right? And we heat them up to high temperatures such that they get a browning reaction, right? Think like you're cooking bacon or searing a hamburger. There are reactions occurring in there, and particularly in that charred brown part, you're forming things that are really horrible for you, like advanced glycation end products. You can get some, PAHs, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, I think PAHs, heterocyclic amines, anyway. But advanced glycation end products are, the big one that we worry about all of them. And so if you look at the amount that you get of those things in charred animal foods, it's exponentially higher than you would in a charred vegetable food. Okay. So there probably is a little bit of advanced glycation end product in the leaves of like that Brussels sprout, the Brussels sprouts I roasted last night. Invariably some of the outer leaves fall off and kind of get a little more charred, and they do kind of taste really good. And there probably are some things in there that aren't great for you, but if you eat the rest of the Brussels sprout, you don't need to worry. Trust me. And relative to charred animal foods, it's not even a contest, the difference in quantity. Yeah.
Okay. This one just came in. Are eggs bad for cardiovascular health?
I've already answered that question. So
so.
I think eggs can absolutely fit into health as part of a balanced diet. And I think we have the data to support that. Although, if someone doesn't want to do eggs, that's totally fine with me too.
Okay. And it looks like those are all the questions that have come in.
Okay, great. Do we ever figure out, let me see if I can look at packs.
Someone from a different platform said that it's for seniors. Paxlovid is for seniors who get COVID.
Oh, that's right. I knew I'd heard it. Okay. Yeah. I'm not gonna, that's nothing to do with my line of expertise. So that person absolutely needs to talk to their healthcare provider. I have no experience with Paxlovid, which I do know it's a COVID medicine they give for COVID, diminishing the severity of COVID. I know nothing about it. And so please address your questions to your healthcare provider.
Okay, here's someone just asked, any tips for hair loss? I'm 50 and it's getting worse.
Yeah. So, I have more hair than I've had in years, and I've had really significant issues with hair loss. So I'm empathetic. My heart goes out to you. I mean, oh my gosh. And mine started kind of about that age. So it's probably what we call androgenic alopecia. It's related to hormonal changes just at your stage of life. Although, you should be evaluated to be sure it's not a medical condition that can do that. Um, so that's really important. And the best doctor to go to for an evaluation of kind of like hair loss that you feel like is just not normal is going to be a dermatologist. And there's going to be a series of tests they'll run. Want to make sure there's not problems with your thyroid. There's a few things they'll look at. And assuming all those things are normal, okay, so assuming your workup, the doctor fails to identify any, health condition that needs to be treated that could be causing it, then what you think about again is this hormonal stuff. And then I'm just going to kind of tell you the things that really help me. So I do now take a good multivitamin. Um, and I take a B complex. I've always taken my omega-3 fish oil. I do my vitamin D. So I'm just kind of telling you the difference in the things I do now that I used to not do is really religious on taking those supplements. Of course, my diet has always been good, so I can't blame it on that. And then I have used Rogaine, right? Topical, because it works and it's over the counter. And then I have a red light. And I think that's been the variable that to me I've seen the most changes in my hair is red light. And anyway, I'm not an expert in red light therapy, but you can research that on your own. But you can now, as a regular consumer, uh, get these amazing lights that for a long time, used to be like $50,000 for one of them, but now they can use LED technology, which has made them really affordable and inexpensive. And one of the absolutely known benefits of doing red light is it can stimulate hair growth. And yes, something is helping me, and that's really been. And my hair really, really got thick, the thickest it's ever been when I got my red light.
Okay, this person asks, how many blueberries a day are adequate daily for brain health?
That's a great question. And so I would, I'm someone kind of firmly on record that I think everyone should be taking, I think of like food as medicine, eating berries every day, or striving to, because no such thing, we're going to always, even if we say we're going to do something every day, invariably there'll be occasional days you don't. And what I've been doing in the afternoon, because I do this 2 meal a day as part of just the way I eat, a lot of times between those 2 meals, I do start feeling a little uncomfortable hunger. All right. And I don't need to lose weight. And what I do is I go and I let that cue me, and I do 1 cup of blueberries and 1 cup of cherries. I use frozen. I'm a huge fan of frozen berries for this reason. I'm just going to show you. So I love these big cherries you get at Costco, and I love these blueberries. Right? So I take a cup of these, I put it in one bowl, and then I pop that in the microwave. And it's actually best to thaw your berries in the microwave. It will maximize their antioxidants, that kind of more rapid thawing out. And then I sprinkle it with some ginger powder, and then I eat that. Sometimes I put a little kefir on it, but sometimes I don't. And I try to do that every day. And it makes you feel so good. So yes, I mean, people are kind of crazy to not have berries every day, particularly once you're over the age of 50.
Okay, going back to the hair quickly. Someone said red light hair cap. I think they're looking for clarification.
No, it's not a red. It's so I did research the red lights pretty thoroughly before I made my investment, and you can really get ripped off if you don't know what you're doing. Um, so platinum therapy lights, again, I don't have any, I'm not going to get any, promotion for saying this or any money for whatever. I'm just telling you, I did my due diligence and they're not cheap, but you can get smaller ones that are, more affordable. I have the full panel, which is a few $1,000s. But you can get smaller ones for, a few $100s that will, just target certain areas. So you can get one that targets from here up. In fact, I just got it for with my sister for a niece who's just finished chemotherapy and is trying to get her hair back more quickly. We got it as a gift, and I think it was like $800. So platinum therapy lights. That is again a very reputable brand.
Okay, so next question. For choosing an over-the-counter probiotic, do you have any suggestions?
Not really. Other than to say the most effective, the safest, and by far the cheapest way to take advantage of probiotics is to eat fermented foods. Okay, nothing. I can't even tell you how big there's not even a contest between taking a probiotic and eating a fermented food. It's just, I mean, the fermented foods are so far superior. Okay, so I would just say you need to include a variety of fermented foods in your diet. And at this point in science, most probiotics are, it's just kind of like a crapshoot. I mean, are you taking the right ones? And is it that the one you really need? I mean, we just don't have the data yet to be able to customize probiotics. There may be occasional individuals with very specific conditions in which they've tested certain strains and those strains are available. And your doctor may say, okay, I want you to take this specific one. And I think that's where things are going, but we're just not quite there yet. There is a company that has spore-based probiotics that I think if someone feels like they need to take a probiotic, and I think they're called Microbiome Labs. There's another one that is, again, well-researched, that's very, it has a real wide array of different strains in it. It is expensive, but that would be another one that comes to my mind because I do know they're pretty darn evidence-based, and that's Seed, SEED. So Microbiome Labs and Seed. But again, I really think that what you want to do first and foremost is do a variety of fermented foods. Can you do your kefir? Can you do your kraut? Can you do all these other fermented vegetables you can now get? I mean, I could open my refrigerator and show you probably 6 different brands of bought off the shelf fermented foods that are in there. So that would be my first recommendation.
Great. And I thought it would be good to remind everyone that the replay of this session will be posted to Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Some people joined late. Maria was asking about the cassava flour, almond flour, and just wanted to note that you answered that in detail in the beginning of this.
Oh, great. Thank you.
That's been covered. And then someone didn't hear, what is it again that you sprinkle on top of the frozen blueberries and frozen cherries?
Oh, powdered ginger. So ginger is one of the most potent anti-inflammatories we have. Turmeric is at the top of the list, then ginger. And the one reason I'm doing these berries, first of all, it's delicious. It's a treat. And here's another really cool thing to tell you, because I'm kind of boning up and prepping now for my next course release, which is going to be my Way Less for Life course, and I'm revamping that. And I'm kind of in the midst of doing that now. And I was just being reminded that when, yesterday, and it kind of prompted me, let me make sure I go get my berries and cherries. When we eat fruit or vegetable that a cup of it has less than 100 calories, of which both cherries and blueberries fall in that category because they each have less than 100 calories per cup. If you could eat a cup of any fruit or vegetable that has less than 100 calories in that cup, it's known as negative calories, meaning the next time you eat, because you've eaten that volume, the volume of that food that has such a low caloric density, when you go to eat next, you're going to eat less calories than you had before, and it will typically be less than what you ate earlier. Does that make sense? So that in a way, it's a form of negative calories, which is another reason to do it. Plus, you're getting all this extraordinary nutrition and anti-inflammatory power in those berries. But why not just go ahead and go shake, shake? It takes 2 seconds to do that. I mean, this is how my mind rolls because I know this stuff so much. And this is how I want everyone to be. It took me no time to just take some ginger out and go and throw it on there, right? So herbs and spices, again, incredibly underutilized. They're just like, they're like prescription drugs that you have right in your kitchen. And you just have to remember to use them. And just like, oh yeah, I can put some of that in, and just go for it. Right?
Okay, great. Okay, so speaking of weight control, someone asks how you navigate holiday cocktail parties and all of the events this whole season.
Yeah. So fortunately, I think I'm off a lot of those lists. I'm kind of a homebody. I'm not, I love people. I'm not an introvert. I'm an extrovert. But thankfully, but I don't really necessarily enjoy some of that kind of thing. Personally, I love real conversations that are in depth. So, put me in a small dinner party way before you put me in a cocktail party. Anyway, but I know what you're saying. Even I'm going to have to probably be going to some of these things. I've been having to do that lately. I had one earlier in the week, and I'll tell you, I kind of failed, because for my goals before I went in there, and it was an amazing caterer. It was outstanding food, and much of the pickup food was super healthy, right? But I, really enjoy eating my dinner. And I love, I know if you're not hungry, food doesn't taste nearly as good. And I decided, I knew I was getting to this little gathering at 5:30. And I thought, you know what? And it's just right down the street from where I live. I thought, you know what? I'm just not going to eat any of it. And then I'm going to come home and eat my dinner because my dinner was already ready. And sure enough, I got there and, even me, I just like, I had a few things. I did have a few things and I still came home and ate my dinner. I guess the point I'm saying is, yes, it takes kind of before you go, kind of making the decision like, okay, either I'm not going to eat it or I'm just going to let myself have two things. And I had another holiday party the week before that, and I did much better. And what I did then is I had already eaten before I went. And maybe that helped because I wasn't hungry at all.
Well, I was going to say we actually have the holiday weight control guide, some tips from you on the link in your profile. And
Okay,
my
great.
favorite one that you taught me was when you go to those parties and you don't want to restrict yourself, go ahead and eat the things you know are healthy. And so you'll have very little room for the treats.
Yeah. Great. That's great. Thank you for reminding the audience of that, Zoe. So we do have that little resource that is available for free right now. The link in my bio.
And there's the website I just put up on the screen.
Yeah. So again, look at that resource that's free because it does help you. And when last week I ate before I went and I didn't have anything there. I had nothing there because it was just like, no. I was like, went to the party kind of, really full, not uncomfortably full, but full. Whereas the one 2 days ago, I was pretty darn hungry and it was harder for me to control myself. But I still did, pretty good. But I think you have to have it requires a consciousness and a presence and being aware before you go. And as Zoe said, okay, if you go hungry, we'll at least go to the things that are really, really good for you and like chow on those, right? Do they have a vegetable platter? And can you just like throw a bunch of carrots and tomatoes and that kind of thing get that in your stomach to kind of help assuage that hunger. So.
Okay, well, those are all
All
of our
right.
questions.
All right. Well, thank y'all so much. We're always grateful. I love answering questions and hopefully inspiring you and teaching you too. So see you next time. Thanks.